The latest Fast and Furious film is now in theaters, so it's time for my ranking of all 11 Fast and Furious films from worst to best. Hey everybody, my name's Justin here. I try to watch everything that hits theaters and on streaming services. If you guys are like me, go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below and click that bell notification for more up and coming content. Leave your list down below. How would you rank all 11 of the Fast and Furious films, including the spin-off Hobbs Shaw? Coming in last place is F9. This not only is the most ridiculous Fast and Furious film, it is the one I least care about. From the characters, to the story, to bringing in Dom's brother, Jacob, played by John Cena, and having Han return, a lot of it just does not make sense. And trading in some of those emotional moments from Furious 7 and Tokyo Drift and giving us Han back, who I love as a character, but it made the story not believable, and also you just can't feel those emotional moments again because now he's returning. John Cena is pretty good as the villain. I like him in here. I like exploring the past between Jacob and Dom when they were younger, but the group feels really separated and the performances are very stale in here. I could really care less about Vin Diesel's performance in here. So overall, F9, the moments that they go to space, I just don't care about that. There was a point where I thought, oh, that's so crazy and ridiculous. And then the more that they did it, it just became like a gimmick. It's not even where it's ridiculous and it's enjoyable as well. It's just absolutely stupid. The dialogue is bad. The story is horrible. All around, F9 is the worst one. Coming in 10th place is Tokyo Drift. Now, I know there is a following for this movie and people really do like it. I'm just not one of them. I remember watching it in theaters when it was released and wanting Dom and Brian once again, because mostly the characters in here are not that likable, so it's hard to get fully invested in this movie. Besides Han, I don't really care for Twinkie or Sean. Those are characters that are just there and they're not giving us like some entertaining performances throughout, so it's really hard to feel invested in the storyline, especially for Sean as he's traveling from America to Tokyo and starting a new life with his father and learning about drifting and all of that. The car scenes are filmed really well, and that's where the movie works. Everything else, the storylines, all of that, I really don't care about. Coming in at number 9 is Fast and Furious. I was so excited for the return of the cast once again and all of them together and exploring the relationships now where they are at after the events of the first Fast and Furious film, but it's a bit of a letdown. The performances are good and that chemistry is still there, but the story is weak. The story, it doesn't have a chance to have all of these like thrilling sequences because it does drag quite often. You have Letty's death in the film, and then Paul Walker, and you have Brian and Dom meeting each other again, and Brian knowing about Letty and all of that. It's more focused on the characters, which I do like, but the overall story just feels like it's not moving quick enough when you have a lot of these cool car scenes and some race sequences and big action scenes, especially coming at the beginning of the film, but the story itself doesn't have enough to it to make it a story that is thrilling or entertaining. So looking more at the characters and the dynamics of them leading into the 5th film. But Fast and Furious is one of the more forgettable films. It's one I've watched the least. I don't find too much about it that I absolutely do love, besides the characters and some scenes here and there. So it's one I don't like to revisit that often. Coming in 8th place is Fast and Furious 6. I really think that they should have ended the franchise after Fast 5. It ended on a good note, had everybody got what they wanted, but they brought back Fast and Furious 6, and that's where, unfortunately, the story starts to get more into like the government and doing jobs for people where, the first Fast and Furious, they were hijacking things, and Tokyo Drift was very simple. Fast 5 was just them getting the money that they wanted so they could live a good life. Now we bring back Hobbs now, and he has a job for them to do. I like everybody working together. This is like the last like big film that they had where all of them were together. Paul Walker died during Furious 7, so Fast and Furious 6 was like the last time everybody was all together. Gal Gadot was in there as well. There's some fun moments in here, some ridiculous scenes as well. This is the one where they were just getting really stupid. They had that really long airplane scene, so many moments in here you just like checking out, and it's ridiculous, but I love seeing them all together. Fast and Furious 6 is not a bad film, but it's also not one that I've watched many times. I think of so many times I've watched The Fast and the Furious and Too Fast, Too Furious and Furious 7, even Fate of the Furious. But when it comes down to the ones I've watched the least, it's Fast and Furious 6 and Fast and Furious. I do like some of the relationships that do develop between Fast and Furious 6 and some of the jokes as well, but it's missing that charm that some of the previous entries did have. Coming in 7th place is Fast and Furious Presents Hobbs Shaw. This was a lot of fun. I really like both of these characters. Dwayne Johnson is great as Hobbs, and I love Jason Statham as Deckard Shaw. Putting them together, it's not going to work right away, so you have to kind of build up that relationship, and it's fun to see them butt heads, but then also grow as friends. And that's one of the best parts of this movie, is the two characters. They picked some of the best characters in the franchise and put them together, filled with some really good action and a pretty decent villain with Idris Elba. One that's really exciting to explore some odd things in the franchise. I also love seeing Shaw's sister in here. There's a lot of fun moments in here, and the chemistry between Jason Statham and Dwayne Johnson is there. It carries the film. It's so exciting. There are a lot of big action scenes. You have a focus on family at the end, which I do love. It wasn't very cheesy as well. It felt very genuine and heartwarming. And where some of the other films, whenever Dom's talking about family, you know it's very cheesy. So Hobbs and Shaw approached it in a way that felt very genuine and heartwarming, but also ridiculous and entertaining as well. I would love to see a sequel with the same characters involved. Hopefully we can get that after what happened with Fast X, and knowing that the characters are returning. So it'd be fun to see them revisit this spin-off maybe before Fast and Furious 11 or even before Fast and Furious 12, because I would love to see them do that once again. Coming in 6th place is Fast X. Now, I know a lot of people don't like this film, but I found it to be really entertaining. If it was better than F9, I would be happy, and that's what it is. It's a lot better. We have the characters that just feel more likable this time around. We have John Cena, now he's a good person. The character is very different from F9, but I wasn't as like connected to that character, so I was welcoming this kind of change of character. Dom's son, he's all right. I love Jason Momoa as the villain. So thrilling, so sinister, so just out there. It reminded me of Joker and Jack Sparrow together, but he really brings that energy to the film. There's a certain vibe to him that has been missing from a character in a long time. So he's really challenging the family, and the group's separated throughout, which I really don't care much for. I'd rather see them all kind of together. But you do feel that urgency from Jason Momoa, and there are some really big action scenes. It feels tamer compared to F9, but I loved the characters and the involvement of Jason Momoa. It's a simple revenge film, connecting it to Fast 5, which I love. You're going to see really high on this list. But overall, Fast X gave me what I wanted, a really entertaining film that, yes, it's cheesy, but it's also embracing its tone and realizing where they are at in the franchise. Things have changed since the first film, but it's a lot better than F9, and I appreciated that. Even if it was in the second to last place, I still would have loved that film, because F9 I did not care for, so I appreciate that Fast X is a lot better. Ends on a cliffhanger. I'm excited to see Fast 11 and 12 as well, seeing how they bring characters back and then also kind of wrap up some storylines as well. So Fast X, I understand the complaints about it, but I enjoy the film for what it does offer. Coming in 5th place is The Fate of the Furious. The Fate of the Furious was pretty good. I feel like at this point in the franchise, it was getting stale. So they had to do something new to switch it up, and making Dom not the villain, but having this task that he needed to do and pit himself against his family. And it was really hard for him. And with Charlize Theron as Cypher, a really good villain, but I love how she challenges the family by having Dom against them all and having a lot more of Jason Statham and The Rock. It made me realize how much I miss both of them in F9 and even Fast X. I think the one big reason that I did not like Fast 9 is it didn't have Hobbs. I remember seeing Fast 5 and not caring for that character at all, but now I miss him in the movies. So I'm excited to see him return. But here in The Fate of the Furious, you feel like he's the one leading the group, and he becomes like this really major character. And we have Jason Statham involved as well. The group is really connected throughout, and they're all relying on each other. There are some fun scenes, especially with the submarine and all of that. There are some thrilling scenes, but The Fate of the Furious, I appreciate the newer approach. It wasn't like the same thing. We did have a character that, wanted this technology and wanted to take over the world, but how she challenged the group gave it that more personal side to it, and having Dom act as a kind of different character this time around and fighting off against his family was a breath of fresh air for this franchise. While giving us some of those typical Fast and Furious moments, it still felt new but also the same as well, and that's the reason I love it so much. Coming in fourth place is Furious 7. This is easily the most emotional Fast and Furious film, and going into it, I wasn't prepared for that ending, and they had a hard task at hand with the death of Paul Walker in the middle of the filmmaking for this movie, and I think they did the best thing possible with it. Not killing off Brian, but just kind of ending his story. There's mentions here and there, and I think that's very realistic for the story. They just can't get rid of that character, but it works. There is that really strong emotional moment at the end, but also the build-up. They kind of just drop things here and there in Furious 7 of Brian being a father and the conversations between Dom and Brian about fatherhood and what it means to Brian. They implemented that nicely throughout to where you feel it was put into the right moments, and then that end really did work. Of course, they had to go back and fix things throughout, but the end, every time I watch it, I cry. There's no denying that. It's just beautiful, and you really feel those emotions from everybody involved, even from the director to the crew and the cast as well. It's just full on emotions. But other than that, Deckard Shaw as a villain, Jason Statham, really intimidating. One-man wrecking crew, and really challenges this group. What we see with Han at the beginning of that doesn't really matter much anymore, but he's really intimidating, and I love seeing Jason Statham and Vin Diesel. Some really exciting moments in there. There are some side stories involving like God's Eye that I thought wasn't as developed as I thought it should be, and Mr. Nobody. I think there are some elements that could have been cut out. I understand they had to go back and kind of rework things, but as a story with having a lot more to it, I don't think it fully worked. I think it really could have just been a simple film with Jason Statham, kind of similar to F9. Get rid of the God's Eye and all of those characters that are looking for it. It could have been a more kind of fleshed out story and just a very tight story, but nonetheless, the emotions are there, and the villain is really good. Coming in third place is Too Fast, Too Furious. I was surprised with how many people actually have this at the bottom of the list. Maybe it's just the time that it was released. I was in 6th grade when Too Fast, Too Furious came out, and at the point, I loved the Fast and the Furious. And when Too Fast, Too Furious came out, I got model cars for the movies. I remember weekends just fixing these little toy cars and building them. I had the soundtrack. I had these sweaters that said Too Fast, Too Furious with the cars. I had seen that movie so much, I got the DVD for my birthday. I watched it constantly. So there's that nostalgia to it, but I really like Too Fast, Too Furious. It's got this cool vibe to it. The soundtrack is top notch. But I love seeing the relationship between Tyrese Gibson and Paul Walker develop. He brings that certain vibe to the film. It's a really simple story for the villain, all around fun movie. It's got that vibe to it that really none of the other films have. The location, Eva Mendes and Carter Vallone in the film. It's a movie that I appreciate the overall tone for. It's trying to be like this laid back kind of film, and I understand why people may not like it, but it's one that I've watched the most. I love the characters in here, the fun setting, the soundtrack. The story is very simple. Carter Vallone is a really intimidating villain, and it's a simple story, and that's the reason why it's so high on my list. Coming in second place is The Fast and the Furious, the one that started it all. Fun racing scenes, the introduction of these characters, the moments of Paul Walker acting as a cop, but also getting closer to Dom and his friends and seeing that connection grow, and seeing that, Paul Walker, Brian can change sides, and it's just a fun film. The way that they brought those characters in, built that chemistry, had those fun racing scenes. The villain's not that memorable, but The Fast and the Furious has always been a fun film, and one that I've loved watching. I remember getting the DVD for it when it was released and watching the film constantly over the summers and when I grew up. So, like I said, there's also that nostalgia part to it for this movie and Too Fast, Too Furious. But I like just the introduction of these characters. But coming in first place is Fast 5. This is a clear choice for me. I saw this movie about 10 times in theaters, and I loved every time I went to the theaters to see this, with the song at the end when they're opening the vault and the money's coming down. That puts a big smile on my face. You get all of the characters that you've loved throughout the first 4 films, all of them together now, and it's just about them getting money to live a better life. It doesn't have a villain that's trying to obtain technology. You don't have like the government involved telling them what to do. It's them, like their last big heist, and that's like the characters were like true to themselves in the 5th film. And it's so fun seeing them all get to know each other and work with each other where they didn't get to meet in previous films. Like you had Roman and Tej meet Dom in this film. It's a movie that I've seen so much. I love the tone, the action, having Hobbs in here, Dwayne Johnson. The soundtrack is good. The characters feel very happy in this movie. Everything else after that just is not the same. When you get more of like these big villains that want to obtain technology, or you're having them doing things for like the government, CIA and all of that, they could have approached the franchise so differently, and it just is so bizarre where we are. And Fast 5, I feel like they should have just ended there. The characters were happy. It ended on a fun, positive note. Everybody smiled. They got the money. They lived their life. They should have just ended there. But I still embrace every single sequel after that. But Fast 5 is the one that did it the best in terms of the characters and the racing scenes and the big action scenes and the music and the development of the characters, the relationships. You feel that they are very strong. You see that relationship between Dom and Brian grow throughout. I will always hold the times I went to see Fast 5 in theaters to my heart. I remember like multiple times seeing it by myself and just cannot get over how good that movie was. But not only the best Fast and Furious film, but one of my favorite action movies as well. I've seen a lot of people have it on their list as number 1. It's just a really fun film. So there you guys have it, my ranking for all Fast and Furious films. Leave your list down below. How would you rank them all? Let me know in the comment section down below, and stay tuned for more up and coming content like this. My name is Just Watches Movies, and you guys stay classy, YouTube.